Welcome to the 2025 Celebration of Preservation Awards, presented by the Cleveland Restoration Society and the American Institute of Architects Cleveland chapter. We look forward to this joint program every year as we recognize the preservation projects that transform our communities. Tonight's program is made possible by the many generous companies that sponsor this event. To our capital sponsors, a heartfelt thanks for your generous contributions. To our pillar sponsors, we're oh so grateful. And our cornice level sponsors who help make tonight's program possible. While this year's winners were a diverse group, from a one-room historic structure to a 13-story downtown hotel, perseverance was the common thread that ran through all of the projects. Whether it was supply chain issues, construction surprises, or financing delays, winners had to be patient and persistent to the end. These architectural gems have been creatively and meticulously rehabilitated. Everything from bathrooms, kitchens, and interior staircases in Cleveland's neighborhoods to cultural landmarks like the James A. Garfield Memorial, a destination for visitors from across the region and beyond, will be celebrated tonight. The CRS AIA jury reviewed many projects and selected those which are the most significant and representative of the value of historic preservation. The jury chose projects that are representative of criteria established by AIA Cleveland and the Cleveland Restoration Society. The criterion used included the quality of work, adherence to recognized preservation standards, risk factors, strategic implications to promote preservation in the region, innovative preservation, financing or partnering techniques, and the impact of the nominated property on the larger community. So please join us in recognizing and congratulating our winners. The Honorable Mention Award for Neighborhood Impact goes to the Matthias and Mary Stepp House.
Hi, my name is Stephanie English, and I'm the co-owner of the Matthias and Mary Stepp House located on East 25th Street in downtown Cleveland.
And I'm Mike English, own the building with Stephanie.
My name is Matt Plesnick. I'm the project architect. I was lucky enough to work with Mike and Stephanie on the project.
So Mike and I arrived in Cleveland in May of 2019, and we took our life savings and gave up corporate world and decided we fell in love with Cleveland and its architecture, and we were going to save some buildings here. I had my eye on this building for about a month, and I thought, there's no way I'm bringing this to Mike. We just selected what we were going to do. And then the warehouse 2 doors down from it became available. And I thought, well, okay, now we have an opportunity to change the entire block and really reactivate it. So I tricked my husband into telling him that I was taking him on a little architectural tour downtown. And I pulled up in front of this building and said, I want to buy it. You know, I would like us to buy it. He almost fell off his chair.
I've heard from other Clevelanders since then that anybody who drove by it and noticed it was always charmed by it. It was in fairly sad shape at that point. I think it had just seen some decades of just gradual decline. But many things about it were as close to they would have been in the 1800s as you can imagine.
As we peeled back the layers of the dropped ceilings and the drywall or the bad plaster repairs. We were really excited to see a lot of the original features still underneath. We were just glad that they covered what was there instead of removing it.
I remember walking through the second story with Mike, and I think he had an idea. Oh, let's raise the roof here. And I was like, oh, but it's high already. And he's like, yeah, but what if we go a little bit higher? And we have those windows that are located in the entablature of the building right below the roof line. And it kind of recaptured those windows as part of the space and makes that second story space just a, bit more grand.
The ceiling had been dropped to about 7.5 feet, and these are 11-foot ceilings originally. Restoring those and going back to the arched windows was another example of just bringing the building back to life.
In addition to the windows, I'd say something I think that was really, really well done was the interior stair. I've worked on lots of projects where we've tried to restore stairs, but I don't know that anyone has been as successful as you guys have been.
Basically, from the main floor into the basement, a lot of the original banister still existed, but unfortunately, somebody had made a kind of a misguided effort to try to widen the stairwell at some point, and it used 4x4s for the posts and railings. And so when I found the old spindles, I knew that we needed to recreate the railing and match from basement to the top floor. It all was original. And it's true, finding somebody who could recreate the railing radius and height change and all of those details, it was probably technically one of the harder parts of the job.
People are charmed. They are in love with it. They really enjoy it. Features that I had forgotten about, we started getting, I love the heated floors in the bathrooms. People just feel at home. They feel comfortable. They feel like they're part of something that they really enjoyed living in. And it's been a real pleasure to hear the reactions of those who are living in it on a day-to-day basis.
Things are happening in the neighborhood, and it feels good to be part of that. Thank you to the Cleveland Restoration Society and AIA Cleveland for the Honorable Mention Award for Neighborhood Impact.
Our Heritage Home Program Award goes to the Stein Robinson residence.
So my name is Sarah Stein. My husband is Don Robinson. We live in Pepper Pike. And in 2016, we bought kind of a rambler. The only advice as far as rehabbing an older home that I would give to people is that you have to be flexible. The Heritage Home Program was a lifesaver. It was an absolute lifesaver. We did the master bathroom and the kitchen. I think they're drop dead gorgeous. I'm thrilled with how it turned out. The original kitchen was gray cabinets, black countertops, and brown walls. Now, I don't know about you, but if you have cloud cover 6 months a year, that's not reflecting any ambient light. It was incredibly dark. There was an enormous structural support beam in the kitchen, in the ceiling, and it was huge, really huge. And the 2 posts, and then that limited the island, and that limited kind of the view and the feeling of openness. You see something like you see on television in all the programs, and they want to put this enormous structural support beam in the ceiling up into the attic, so it's, it opens up this space. Yeah, well, wait a minute. What about the gas lines that are up there and the electrical lines? And it becomes cost prohibitive and in some sense, probably not the best idea. So I said, maybe can you make them a little smaller? Or maybe we can substitute something. I see sometimes they replace it with something smaller. And sure enough, fully 50% on these beams was decorative. So when they stripped the beams, it was half the size of what it looked like originally, which was wonderful. It opened the place up, and it was what I wanted. One of the things we did to save money was keep the footprint in both rooms. That didn't mean we didn't make variations, but we kept the footprint. So I wasn't moving where the shower was. I was expanding the shower by taking out a closet, but I wasn't moving it. I wasn't moving where the tub was. I was turning it so it didn't take up 2/3 of the bathroom. in a sense, that's a special preservation technique, which is to leave it the way it was. It was well done. It was just out of date. We had a lot of questions going through the process, and it's very important to have somebody who understands construction and renovation to be able to get those questions asked and answered. So that made a huge difference, the amount of advisors that we had available to us through this process. I'm really very appreciative. From the bottom of my heart, I'd like to thank you and the Cleveland Restoration Society for the Heritage Home Program Award, but also for offering this Heritage Home loan to people that is so affordable and enables you to take whatever little design you want to do or project and make it your dream.
The winner of the Award of Merit for the reconstruction of a religious landmark is the Joseph and Emma Smith Home.
Well, my name is Ben Pickles. I'm the Director of Historic Sites for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, headquartered here in Salt Lake City.
My name is Elwin Robison, and I am the Principal of Robison Building Analysis.
I'm Eric Brose. I'm the Director of Design at DS Architecture. I'm also the Studio Director for the Adaptive Reuse and Historic Preservation Studio.
I had the great privilege of working with the rest of the team on researching and restoring the Joseph and Emma Smith home in Kirtland, Ohio, home of the first president and founder of our church, Joseph Smith. The home was built in 1833. It's the place where Joseph was living with his family when the construction and the dedication of the Kirtland Temple was undertaken and completed. And that is a very significant building in church theology. Joseph and his wife Emma and their children lived in the home until 1838. So the home from 1838 until when the church acquired it in 2012 had gone through a lot of modifications. Our goal all along was to take the home back to what it originally looked like in the 1830s when Joseph and Emma Smith and their children lived there. We did a lot of intensive study on the home, completing historic structure report, a lot of archaeological research around the perimeter of the home and even underneath some of the additions that were added to the home, trying to figure out the original footprint.
In 1891, the home was remodeled as a two-story Queen Anne. Of course, it's a story and a half Greek Revival. And they lifted up the building and extended the roof up and did a number of things to increase its size. A lot of its original characteristics were hidden. We had a local carpenter. He pulled out all of the additions that had been made to the 1833 building so that we could see what we had left. And we had enough of the sill plates and top plates that we could tell where all the original studs were. And that gave us where the windows were located. And then we also were able to locate where the chimney went through the second floor framing. And we could also determine where the stair was located. From there, we said, well, how do you pull that together into a typical Greek Revival plan?
Even when we had to use new materials to fill in where original materials had already been removed or destroyed, we tried to use new materials that were manufactured in historically appropriate ways. So instead of circular saws, we had a local sawmill cut it with a reciprocating saw.
I think another challenge from a design standpoint was the balancing act we did between preserving the history and integrity of the building and then also making it accessible and making it perform with a little better insulation and things like that. So kind of trying to do both of those and finding that balance. So the home is elevated off of the ground, and because some of the visitors may have mobility issues, working a ramp into the design was desired. And we did our best to kind of tuck the ramp behind the building, so when you're seeing it from the front or from the roadway, it's as invisible as possible. The other thing that's interesting is working that insulation in between two layers of clapboard. So from the inside, You can't tell that there's insulation behind it. From the outside, it looks like the same clapboard, but sandwiched between it is an air barrier and a layer of insulation to get performance we're looking for and to keep moisture out so that the building will last another 200 years.
We had a team of experts, right? Everywhere from architectural historians and engineers to archaeologists and everything in between, cultural landscape architects, to help us restore the setting of the home. It's not just the home itself, it's the entire site that people come and visit. We have members from all over the world that come each year to visit. In fact, 2024 was the first complete year that the Smith home has been open to the public, and we were very pleased that 33,000 people toured the home in 2024. Thank you to Cleveland Restoration Society and AIA Cleveland for the Award of Merit for the reconstruction of a religious landmark.
The Award of Merit for the revitalization of a commercial building goes to American Savings Bank.
I'm Wendy Naylor. I'm a historic consultant for the project with Naylor Wellman.
I am Diana Wellman with Naylor Wellman, the historic preservation consultant on the project, working with Wendy.
I am Paul Shaya with Shaya Group. We were the developers of the project. We're also the owners of the project.
And I'm Jason Surdock, and I'm with Shaya Group. I was sort of the owner's rep and project manager.
It was first built in circa 1870 as a rectory for Grace Episcopal Church. Really wasn't until 1919 that this American Savings Bank building was constructed. The previous restaurateur had put a 3-story turret on the front of the building, which no longer remains. So now we have that beautiful glazed terracotta facade that was put in place by the American Savings Bank. American Savings stayed in the building for a number of years. They were there until 1969. And really what we see on the building today is mostly the mark left by the American Savings Building.
My father, Victor, purchased the building in 1984, and it had been mostly occupied by various retail establishments and restaurants until 2018. So we had an opportunity with a fully vacant building that really needed a lot of renovation work.
We learned a lot about terracotta and trying to match it and making it work. And for the front of the building, cleaned, patched, recoated, regrouted. There were some damaged units that could not be saved, and we had to have a few pieces of GFRC, so glass fiber reinforced concrete. All of the windows on the building were replaced, and a few windows were added on the back, and the 2 large central windows on the front of the building were completely redone exactly the way that it was originally. So that was kind of a big undertaking. Down the alley, there's no 2 windows that are exactly the same size. Every single one of the windows was unique. So a lot of time went into the installation of the windows, keeping all the original brick openings working. We had this challenge of installing these fire-rated stairwells. We were doing a little bit of exploration and demo work to figure out how we were going to attach the stairs to the walls. And we got in there, and some of the guys over at the structural firm were like, we've heard of them, but we've never seen it. It's called an inverted bow truss beam. So that was neat. We had to figure a way to keep that and how we were going to work around it, making it into a restaurant.
When you walk into the vestibule on the first floor, the American Savings tile is still there that was protected during construction. And above it is a beautiful lamp that was LED relit. And so those are 2, right out of the gate, you walk in and you're seeing 2 very striking historic pieces that remain in the building.
Well, we started out as naive historic developers. We didn't know what we were getting into. And of course, it was a lot more than we thought we were getting into. We have an establishment now, serves the neighborhood lunch, brunch, dinner, and often has live music. And we have a 3rd floor. We have a short-term rental unit, which is fairly large and has a walkout patio. And the place has a lot of historic pictures inside and, a nice historic book. And I think introduces people to Cleveland now, but also Cleveland then. We took a building that was underutilized. We made it beautiful. You know, the phrase "a labor of love" applies quite a bit.
Thank you to Cleveland Restoration Society and AIA Cleveland for the Award of Merit for the revitalization of a commercial building of the American Savings Bank.
The winner of the Outstanding Home Renovation Award, 3353 Maynard Road.
My name is Allie Pendleton, and I am one of the homeowners.
My name is John Stewart. I'm with the Tartan Group, and I was the general contractor.
Our house is located in the Fernway neighborhood in Shaker Heights. It was built around 1932. There was very little done to this house between the time it was built and the time we came upon it. It was in pretty much original condition in most of the spaces. I wanted to preserve and protect a historic home and maintain all of the old details and all of the things that make these homes so special, while also demonstrating that you can do that and have a house that lives like a modern home.
Initially, I guess we were committed to just leaving as much intact as we could leave intact. So during site protection, demolition, we labeled everything. We tried to reuse everything that we could. And where we couldn't, we would source period appropriate materials and use time-honored traditional techniques for restoration. Restored all the windows. We restored all of the doors. We weather stripped and sealed. We reused hardware where we could, reused plumbing fixtures, tile. This house had been around 100 years. And we were going to restore it to its original glory and condition as close as we could, but prepare it for the next 100 years.
The nice thing about the team we had was that we saw the challenges as opportunities. I was drawing the kitchen out and I realized that there was just not going to be enough space for the cooktop and the kitchen sink as they had been laid out. We were going to be bumping into each other, and it was not feasible. And that gave us the opportunity to remove this small little cramped half bath and give ourselves the space we needed and move the half bath to a better location when it wasn't right inside the side door and make a more elegant space. I spent months researching tile and finally found where the tile came from, because originally when we started on the project, we weren't sure we were going to be able to save it, and I wanted to be able to replace it if we had to remove it.
The floor, when you enter the front door, was somewhat heaved. The mud pack below was delaminating, and all of the joists were rotted and the sill plate was rotted. So we had to figure out how to replace those, shore them up, and then basically build a new mud pack around it without damaging any of the tile above. And we were able to really shore up the tile.
Jobbik is a company that was founded in the early 1900s by a woman. It continues to operate in the same Tudor house in Detroit. It's a pretty incredible group of artisans, and they, make this historic tile the exact same way that they used to. Once I learned the history of it, I was absolutely determined to not pull it up, but figure out a way to maintain it. And so I challenged John a lot on that one, seeing all of that come to fruition and literally walking into rooms and seeing this vision that I had had in my head in front of me was amazing. It's been astonishing. We just want to say a big thank you to the Cleveland Restoration Society and AIA Cleveland for the award for Outstanding Home Renovation. Thank you so much.
Outstanding Renovation of a Cleveland Landmark Award goes to Hotel Cleveland.
I'm Neha Capellas. I'm the CFO at Skyline Investments. I'm part of ownership of the hotel.
Hi, I'm Kim Romance. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing for Hotel Cleveland. Hello, my name is Frank McGee. I'm the general manager at Hotel Cleveland.
I lead my self-named company, McCartan Inc. We're an interior design company.
I'm Doug Giebel. I'm the project architect for the Hotel Cleveland project.
And I'm Jared Freeman. I'm the general manager for the design build group at Maroos Brothers Construction. So the building was built in 1918. The Van Sweringen brothers were the original owners of the building. Originally it was designed and built as a 1,000-room hotel. Throughout the years, it's been renovated and cut down to a 491-room hotel. In the early 1960s, they added the 5-story parking garage and grand ballroom. It became the Renaissance Cleveland Hotel in 1993. The Skyline Investments took ownership of the hotel in 2012.
Throughout the years, notable figures have stayed in the hotel. We've hosted presidents. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke here when he was accepting a Nobel Peace Prize. Duke Ellington has been here. Gladys Knight. We hosted the 1997 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremonies. Really notable events in both the nation's history and in Cleveland have taken place here.
We've been looking at this renovation for a long time and needed to find the right partner to work with on the design that would sort of have that same vision as ownership. The building is beautiful and it needed to come back to its grandeur.
On the exterior of the building, before we started, they had netting and strapping holding terracotta elements. So we completely redid the exterior from top to bottom. So there was steel over windows that was rusted out and needed to be replaced. We replaced every window in the buildings. There's ornamental plaster that had to be made from historic molds throughout and really match what was there.
We gutted all of the bathrooms. So when we did that, it uncovered basically all of the sins from previous renovations. We uncovered a horizontal mechanical chase. It was about a 5 foot, 4 or 5 foot tall space that spanned the entire length and width of the hotel. There were holes in the ceiling, which needed to be fire rated. So we contacted the city to work on details to make that space whole again.
Our lobby's on the second floor, and that's one of the unique features of the building. You see people come up the grand staircase and look, and they're just like, wow, to have that wow factor is really impactful for first impressions.
The original tile was from a quarry in Tennessee that had been shut down, but had recently, over the past decade, been reopened. So we actually went to that quarry to get that stone, so it matched, basically perfectly. And then you got handrails, bronze handrails that needed to be refinished.
Anytime you have an active construction site, while you're still having guests come in, you still have to give that level of service, and the expectation is still there to receive that level of service. So it made it challenging in ways, but we had a very creative operations team, as well as the construction team and Colum and his team. We collaborated on different solutions to make sure that we could still take care of the guest, even though there was a lot of construction going on.
Part of running this hotel is wanting to do it in its best state to maximize its potential.
Colum and his team did a fantastic job keeping the historic integrity of the hotel while weaving in some modern features.
Hotel Cleveland, which is a historic building, clearly now needed to be itself again. Original imagery and drawings also guided us to not overdo the historic. So if we're restoring something, that we restore it authentically. And the modern things placed in isolation, they're not trying to connect and merge. They're just standing free and like gallery-like in a way. I will say the single most memorable thing was that I cannot think of a single engagement with a person from Cleveland where I didn't come away with a smile on my face and feel like that was a great relationship. And thinking, wow, it's really great to work there in Cleveland. That's what it is. And, you get very nice people there. Don't know what's in the water.
And we're very lucky in the hotel team. They're all very motivated and very service oriented. So we've come through the construction and opened with like a new energy and enthusiasm to welcome guests now.
On behalf of Skyline Investments and Maroos Brothers Construction, we would like to thank the Cleveland Restoration Society and AIA Cleveland for the outstanding renovation of the Cleveland Landmark Award.
The winner of the award for excellence for preservation of a community building is the Medina War Bond Building.
My name's Dennis Hanwell. I'm the mayor for the city of Medina.
And I'm Brian Farron. I'm the president of the Medina County Historical Society. Well, the building was constructed in 1942 by a group of volunteers. The fact is that it was a very prominent spot in the county to raise funds and purchase war bonds for the activities of World War II. And as a result, Medina County was one of the leading counties in the state for revenue raised in this manner. Abbott and Costello came to Medina one evening on a circuit through the country to help promote war bonds, but also acknowledge those leading counties that have really stepped up and contributed. So everybody did their part. Posters that were posted all around this building and inside, they showed, the cost to lose a war is far more expensive than a war bond's going to cost you. After the war, it went to the home of a Purple Heart recipient, a dentist, Dr. Fred Fry, whose home happened to be adjacent to our Medina hospital. But in any event, he used the building as a garden shed until the hospital acquired his property through expansion. And so the building was moved to the front of the Medina hospital on Route 18 as you enter Medina. And it sat there for nearly 30 years. We made the pitch that it would do well at our museum, the McDowell Phillips House. And so we won the right to have it moved to our museum property. At the time we wanted to move it, Route 18 was being reconstructed. The local contractor doing the road was very concerned about even helping us. We needed his front end loader to lift the front end of the building up a little so we could get some blocks underneath it and eventually the tow truck bed. And he said, I don't know. He goes, the boss is going to, if something happens, you're going to have to sign off on this and I'll take the responsibility. I said, let's just get her done. We looked underneath. We thought it was pretty solid and it turns out it was. And then of course, getting it loaded onto the cement pad off the truck was just as risky. A local insurance company offered to help scrape the paint. Our local Sherwin-Williams store and the management personnel offered to supply the materials and labor to give it a good coat of paint. And then the upper rack, that required a total rebuild. Most of the wood had rotted. So some of our local Kiwanians, some other volunteers, some former JCs, as myself, we gathered our saws and lumber and commenced to rebuilding that. It looks pretty simple from the ground, but actually those joints and angles were quite complicated to challenge us novice carpenters.
The Historical Society likely could not have pulled this off on their own, nor could the city, nor could Main Street. But what we have a habit of doing here is all working together for a common goal, getting the resources, bringing these difficult projects to fruition.
People working together, as the mayor indicated, can make such a difference. We don't need sometimes a lot of fancy things to get projects done, but we do work hard together.
We're very appreciative of the Historical Society's work and efforts in the movement and restoration and preservation, and it's just something else that makes Medina special. This is not only Medina's history, but really our state and our country's history.
In acknowledgement on behalf of the Board of Trustees of the Medina County Historical Society, we thank the Cleveland Restoration Society and the AIA for the Preservation Award to the War Bond Building.
So on behalf of the City of Medina, we'd like to thank the Cleveland Restoration Society and AIA Cleveland for this celebration of preservation award.
Award of Excellence for Stewardship of an Ecclesiastical Building goes to the First Congregational Church of Claridon.
My name is Susan Bocoon, and I am the head trustee for the First Congregational Church of Claridon.
Hi, I'm Pam Plott. I'm the treasurer of First Congregational Church of Claridon.
Hi, I'm Peter Bohan, a principal architect at Prospectus Architecture.
Hi, I'm Gwendolyn Frank, and I am an architect at Prospectus Architects.
I'm Greg Frost, and I am the owner and president of Frost Architectural Preservation.
Hi, I'm Chase Calabrese. I was the project manager for Maruce Brothers Construction. We were the general contractor.
I am John Williams, a principal with Process Creative Studios. I got an email from Susan. Dear sir, we're looking for an architect that has historic preservation work to help us with a little bit of a ceiling problem at our church. Okay, this is not a little ceiling problem. This was a catastrophic failure.
The secretary was working that day, and as she was getting ready to leave, she heard some groans and whatever, and it's an old church, so old building, so she just thought it was that. She left at 5:30. At 6 o'clock, when the choir director came in for choir practice, he could not get the door to the sanctuary open because the ceiling had fallen within that half hour.
One of the things we discovered was that the ceiling that we thought was original, which was a wood suspended ceiling, actually had two ceilings behind it. One being a vaulted ceiling that was covered with plaster, and the second one was plastered over that.
A lot of people came in to look at it as it was lying on the pews, the ceiling, and they went, oh my. And Greg Frost was the first one that walked around and said, this is beautiful. And I knew then he was the man.
We were called in to do the demo, and that there was a little bit of danger involved because some of the ceiling was still attached. So we had to carefully remove what was on the pews and then install some rigging to lower the rest of the ceiling. And we did salvage as much of the wood, the tongue and groove wood, that we could.
Our biggest hurdle was making new materials appear to be original and historic. With that being said, there was the barrel ceiling with original timbers, hand-carved, hand-hewed with the radius. Over time, those have warped and walked over, some are cracked. We actually removed a couple good ones, built a jig to match the existing radius, and with a jig was able to use new lumber to match the existing but make it structurally sound.
Now when you walk in, you can say, well, the wood ceiling that you see was where the ceiling we knew for 80, 90, 100 years. And then you can see on either edge the drywall vaulting, which replicates the original lath and plaster ceiling.
The old tongue and groove ceiling was then repurposed into a new altarpiece. So not only do we have sort of a reminiscence in the design of the ceiling, but we also have the actual presence of that old wood ceiling at the back of the altar.
We worked really closely with our electrical engineers, and it's always a challenge with the historic space. So we looked for a very clean lighting plan in the ceiling, and we're able to give the congregation really dedicated controls so they could really specialize where that light was.
The church was built between 1829 and 1831. The pews that are in there are the original pews, and the tradition goes that the backs of our straight back pews all came from one whitewood tree. It meant a great deal to us to be able to restore and put the pews back the way they were. People still come up to me and say how much they like it. And as I've always said, I think if the people who built the church walked in today, they would still feel comfortable in the church.
Thank you to the Cleveland Restoration Society and AIA Cleveland for the Award of Excellence for Stewardship of an Ecclesiastical Building.
The Award of Excellence for Sensitive Rehabilitation goes to the Madison Branch Library.
James Crawford, the director of the Lakewood Public Library.
Peter Bullock, president of HBM Architects, and with the fortune to be the architect for the restoration project of the Madison Public Library.
The Madison Branch Library is the only branch of the Lakewood Public Library, and it's located in the historic Birdtown neighborhood. Built in 1928, and the project architect was the very prominent Cleveland architectural firm Walker & Weeks.
Unfortunately, a lot of the original features and the integrity of the historic building were hidden away. And one in particular great feature was the center space that was originally a vaulted space with clear story windows, had a false ceiling put in.
When you entered the Madison Branch Library, the drop ceiling was removed and it opened up to these beautiful clear-story windows, which were there but hidden. And it's a two-story space, and it's simply breathtaking.
Certainly one of the biggest challenges our team faced was the removal of asbestos, and in particular in the flooring. Paid a lot of attention to leveling those floors properly so that you maneuver through the space and there are no threshold issues. There's no change between terrazzo to cork as you move from the main central space into the flank space.
We saw the opportunities to keep the original character of the building and celebrate it, bring it back to its original glory, but also have a library that serves the 21st century needs of library users. At the Madison Branch Library, that has always been a meeting center. Our architects created some beautiful, inviting, welcoming meeting spaces, which are very heavily used and very much appreciated by the community members.
They really needed a much bigger building. They needed to expand. First, there was no site area to expand. Secondly, it would have really impacted the original architecture in a big way. So one of the things that we identified, and it became readily apparent and a great opportunity, was to really expand by utilizing underused space in the basement. We actually ended up expanding the building footprint in a really great way without interfering with the architectural integrity of the original Walker and Weeks building. It has great proportions, great detailing. The electrified sconces that we did upgrade to LED lighting for efficient lighting, but retain the historic fixture. All those features are really great in this building. And if you were to step back across the street now from this building and look at it today, it has another level of radiance to it that is similar to when it was thought about in 1929.
Lakewood loves its old homes, and we love our old buildings. This was a beautiful building, and it was worthy of restoration.
We'd like to thank the Cleveland Restoration Society and the American Institute of Architects Cleveland for this distinguished award. We're very proud of it, and together with the library and all the folks that were involved, and extremely happy with the outcome and love to see the use of the space by the community of Lakewood.
Award of Excellence for Adaptive Use of a Historic Estate goes to Willoughby House.
I'm Wendy Naylor. I'm a historic consultant for the project with Naylor Wellman.
I am Diana Wellman with Naylor Wellman, the historic preservation consultant on the project, working with Wendy.
Hi, I'm Mike Noondorfer, and I was quite involved with the project to do the historical preservation of the Willoughby House.
The Julia F. Boyce Country Estate was constructed in 1902. It was built for Julia Boyce. She was in the golden age of Cleveland's entourage. Julia Boyce built this house really with the intent to pass it on to her daughter Nancy, which she did. Nancy continued to live in that house for the rest of her life. When she passed away in 1959, she donated the house to Andrews School for Girls. It served as their infirmary for about 20 years before it was then sold and was serving as a nursing home. The architect for the country estate is unknown. The estate consists of the mansion, the carriage house, and we have the root cellar. It's one of those properties that just lend itself so easily to being adapted. A restaurant, a bed and breakfast, an Airbnb, and then to have all those beautiful woodworks and paneling and gorgeous stone and stained glass window and all the things that make historic buildings super beautiful. It was a no-brainer.
Well, it's a story of my brother and Chef Jose and their interest in opening a restaurant, and also my interest in preservation of historic buildings and architecture and the beauty of some of the historical construction. So those things all combine to lead us to the Willoughby House project.
The house is sandstone. It's got limestone accents, and the majority of the house is rusticated sandstone. So all of that was gently cleaned. The masonry in general was in really great condition. It really did not need repointing. There was some work that needed to occur on the porches. There are 3 porches, the front porch that's open, the rear porch that was enclosed at some point in time, and then there's a smaller porch that's off the kitchen, and it's now actually a part of the commercial kitchen for the first floor restaurant and for the bed and breakfast. Really, the inside was it was intact. So as far as the living room was intact, the dining room was intact, there was a study that was intact, and those are all now part of the dining room for the restaurant and the bed and breakfast.
Troy Valencic was our interior designer. He went to antique shops between Cleveland and Pittsburgh and found just the right pieces. Every room is unique, and he just has an incredible eye. People who eat at Julia's or stay at the inn always comment about how beautifully the interior was decorated and designed. As the restaurant has opened and people have come, it's so frequently that people say, I sled rode here as a kid, or I've gone past this building 1,000 times. We're so glad that you've saved it. So those of us that got involved with designing and building and rehabilitating the property, it's just been a joy. We'd like to thank the community for supporting us. It's been just amazing, the comments that we get and the support of people coming to dinner at Julia's.
Thank you to Cleveland Restoration Society and AIA Cleveland for the Award of Excellence for adaptive use of a historic Julia F. Boyce estate.
The Distinguished Restoration of a Community Anchor Award goes to the Baldwin-Buss House.
Donovan Husett, co-president, Baldwin-Buss House Foundation.
Inga Walker, co-president of the Baldwin-Buss House Foundation.
Quinn Miller, designer, Peninsula Architects.
Smith, architect with John Milner Architects, and we were the historic preservation consultant.
I'm Victoria Ramanda, and I am with Pikes Foundation.
Inga and I and Kathy Russell were serving as officers of Hudson Heritage Association at the time. And for 2-3 years before that, the Baldwin-Buss House on Hudson's Village Green had been deteriorating rather quickly.
We realized that if we didn't jump in and make some effort to save the property, it was going to either get torn down or it was going to become new construction or possibly condominiums of townhouses of some sort. So we formed the Baldwin-Buss House Foundation, and that was in 2019. The Baldwin-Buss House, it's also known as the Merino House, was built in 1825 by a well-known local architect named Lemuel Porter. And he was a leading master builder and architect of the Western Reserve. Over 200 years, the house was owned and occupied by only 3 families. So it was the Baldwin family, the Buss family, and then the Merino family after that.
One of the things that put that house at risk, in addition to the neglect, was that nobody really appreciated the architectural value of the house. It was a beautiful federal-style house, largely obscured by additions that were put onto the house. There were 3 additions, one right on the front that obscured the front door, one on the back side that was added because they needed space, and also the L on the south side of the house was also compromised badly by an addition on the west side of the house that simply made the house unrecognizable as an historic treasure.
Due to all the additions and the manipulation that had occurred to the building over time, there was a lot of pieces that we had to peel back and try to figure out what was original versus what was not. And we were able to find out a lot of information once demolition started. We were able to get quite a good timeline of the evolution of the building.
I think one of the important things when it came time for the restoration and after we had done that selective demolition was to think about how the owners would eventually use it. And it wasn't exactly decided, but what we did know was that the period of significance was the important character of the home.
We were able to weigh the architectural significance and the historic significance against what kind of spaces they would require. We did decide to remove that second floor of the L to give pegs a great big volume of space. But then we tried to take a nod to that with some of our trim work and in the interior, so showing where that second floor level originally was with a piece of trim. The pilasters were a very tricky problem to solve. In the 1920s, early 1930s, the Marino family put in a sun porch where they literally cut into the pilasters to do their flashing of the roof of that sun porch. So during construction, you can see a scar that cuts through each four of those architectural features. We had a long debate over whether to replace the pilasters altogether or try to fill in the gap. There's a lot of original woodwork in this building, but unfortunately a lot of it had deteriorated quite significantly. Some of it due just to age and some of it due to interventions.
None of us had ever worked together before. Peg's Foundation, Baldwin-Buss was brand new, Peninsula Architects. And in spite of all of the challenges of getting to know each other, work with each other, some days easier than others, we got it done. And I'm just very pleased that we were able to get that done. Being contiguous to the Peg's Foundation's new headquarters and art gallery, that gallery is going to draw a lot of people into the area and onto the property. The combination of the two facilities together, I think, is very important.
Our group did total grassroots fundraising, and we raised $1.3 million with 300 donors, all from Hudson. It really was a team effort. We went from person to person, and people really believed in us.
I think it's a great roadmap for others who would be looking to do something like this and save it for a long time for a community that cares about it.
I just want to say on behalf of Peg's Foundation and each of our partners, I would like to thank the Cleveland Restoration Society and AIA Cleveland for the Distinguished Restoration of a Community Anchor Award.
The winner of the Distinguished Community Impact Award is Blanket Mills Apartments.
And Mort Levin, developer of the project, and principal in Blanket Mill and Levin Group.
Kevin Hudson from the Levin Group. I'm the director of development.
Katie Hopper was an interior designer for the project.
Howie Hayden with Dimmitt Architects. Worked as the kind of architect project manager on this one.
Chuck Worsdahl. I worked for the general contractor, Ozan Construction, and I was the project manager.
The property is located in the Clark Fulton neighborhood of Cleveland. The company, the Northern Ohio Blanket Mill, was run by Beckman and Company. And so the history of the company dates this to 1878. There was a fire in the original manufacturing building. And so the building, as we know it, was first constructed in 1889 with additions in 1891 and then again in 1899. Northern Ohio Blanket Mill was the largest manufacturer of woolen blankets in the country. They made robes that passengers of horse-drawn carriages would wear. They also made blankets for the horses, and then later made blankets for the U.S. Army in World War I. But by 1932, they were out of business.
I became aware of this project or this building all the way back to 2013 or so, and this property was the largest abandoned building in the area, and either it needed to be renovated or taken down. And we went forward, and the property was awarded historic tax credits, and we proceeded with at that point we're doing 60 units of housing on the second and third floor. And the first floor is going to be commercial tenants. So with the idea that this could benefit the community, be a center for them, is why we really wanted to step in and do this project.
It was an old masonry brick building that was a full restoration. There were also tongue and groove wood planks for the decking, as well as large queen trusses that were made of timber. And I think that was probably one of the most substantial portions of the job, where we had to replace some of these queen trusses.
One of the big things that had to be done was taking off the water tower, but literally it went up a couple floors above the third floor. The roof was in such a fragile state that to take that down was a major risk. More than four corners, basically they had to rebuild them because the building would have collapsed.
It's an industrial factory building that embodies the industrial nature of Cleveland's past, and so it's the large industrial glass windows that go on a rhythm of every 9 feet. And the important things about that was just trying to keep that visible when we did the renovation, bring out the elements of this kind of raw industrial nature that the building possesses.
Annalia Dimon and I work closely as well with Judy Levin, selecting all the finishes for the interiors and just being able to provide such a unique, stylish space for, just be able to bring these large windows with this ample natural light. It's just truly a space that everyone can enjoy.
But we really worked through it all. It was as good a group of architects and contractors that I've worked in over my career, and we're really proud of all of what they put into bringing this to fruition, especially through the pandemic and the labor shortages and the material shortages. And what we're really proud of is that we are really serving the neighborhood. This is going to be a great catalyst for the Park-Fulton neighborhood. I want to thank Cleveland Restoration Society and the AIA Cleveland for awarding us the Celebration of Preservation Award. It means a lot to us because we worked hard on it, so thank you very much.
The Distinguished Restoration of a Cultural Landmark Award and AIA Craftsmanship Award goes to the James A. Garfield Memorial.
Well, I'm Catherine Goss, and I'm President and CEO of Lakeview Cemetery.
I'm Todd Mayer with DLR Group. I was the project manager and architect for the Garfield Memorial.
People come here on first dates. They come here with school groups. They study art and Civil War history and presidential history, American history. They study architecture. It is such a place. Our U.S. President, James A. Garfield, he died in 1881. And at that time, a group of citizens in Cleveland, Ohio, came together, formed an association, and they decided that Lakeview Cemetery was his choice of burial space. They started building it in 1886, and it was completed and dedicated on Memorial Day in 1890. George Keller was the original architect, located in Cleveland, Ohio, but it's also partially located in Cleveland Heights, Ohio. So the borderline goes through the middle of the building.
That was a fun challenge when we figured out that the building kind of split the lines between the city of Cleveland and the city of Cleveland Heights, twice as many permits.
From what I gleaned from some earlier research was that the building had a water problem from the very beginning. The water damage on the interior of the building was so severe that we were concerned that the building could eventually structurally have a problem.
I remember there would be pieces of mortar that you'd find on the ground because they would just pop out of the stones from above. If you went down to the basement, the lower terrace was framed with steel beams, and a lot of those were rusted. That's when we realized it was, critical that we started the work immediately to fix these issues. We kind of divided the project up into 3 phases. Phase 1 is really the structural repairs to the basement. It was steel framing that was there from the 80s that we replaced, and we replaced it with cast-in-place concrete beams and columns, which took a long time, but the concrete would hold up to the moisture that might be trapped or coming into the building into that lower level. Once we got the basement secure and stable, we recognized that there were some trees growing out of the roof. So that immediately changed our focus from waterproofing the lower terrace to getting all the stone repaired, scaffolding the entire tower so we'd have access to all the stone, tuck pointing every single joint in the building. So instead of having patchwork of mortar throughout the building, which is what we currently dealt with, you have brand new mortar throughout the entire building. We were able to develop cleaning methods to clean the stone. The terracotta itself was cracked in some areas, damaged, and the original glaze had completely worn off. And the details really faded into the background. We infilled some of the cracks, repaired the terracotta, and applied a new glaze over the existing terracotta. After the glaze was applied, it was amazing to see how these friezes came back to life.
It's almost too bad that those things are so high that you can't see them more closely, because there's over 100 figures that are life-size
And they're beautiful. The reason I got to see them up close was because we could climb up on the scaffolding and see them really within inches, and they're just magnificent. Much better now by far.
Talking about the craftsmanship that was brought to the project team, there were several ornate sandstone columns with finials on some of the windows. These were carved by masons in the 1800s, and I think we were very fortunate to have some masons that did a beautiful job with capitals, with the columns, with the finials. Some sections where the sandstone was just severely deteriorated, where you're losing almost 50% of the stone mass. They were able to look at pieces of stone that were still intact to a certain degree, use that as reference, and really provide almost copies of those stone carvings that we're able to put back in place onto the building. The intricacy of the carvings is almost a perfect match to what was done when it was originally built. Once we had the stonework and the tower restored, we got to focus on the phase 3, which was the lower terrace. And that was really waterproofing the lower terrace, making sure that water doesn't get down to those beams that we had to repair in phase 1, but also fixing the steps and the railings that are your approach to the building at the front. I'll be honest, I thought the biggest challenge on this was the fundraising. And I thought, big kudos to Kathy and her team to, pull that together.
Well, first of all, we had tremendous support from our board of directors, and we had legislators who cared a lot about this building. So there was a lot of support in that way. It just took time. It's just such an honor to have such a beautiful memorial for the Ohio president. We're so happy we did it, but it was a long 10 years. Thank you to the Cleveland Restoration Society for the Distinguished Restoration of a Cultural Landmark Award and the AIA Craftsmanship Award. We're very proud recipients.
Look for an email coming early next week with links to the awards video on YouTube, a PDF of the printed program, and photos for social media. If you enjoyed tonight's program, please consider becoming a member. Learn more about the benefits, including our free behind-the-scenes Snoop tours, online at clevelandrestoration.org. If you would like to play a larger role in preserving, protecting, and celebrating Cleveland's historic buildings and places, please consider donating to the Cleveland Restoration Society's annual fund. Your gift makes our programs and events possible. Thank you again for joining us at the 2025 Celebration of Preservation Awards. It was wonderful to celebrate with you all this evening. Have a great night.